Is this a case of foul play? A dispute over this wonderful duck meat that's being used to make the Peking duck dish could further inflame EU-China trade tensions. The EU Commission in Brussels says that it's launching a probe to see whether China is dumping Peking duck meat, like this meat here, into the European market. The Peking, or white Peking, is an American breed of domestic duck raised primarily for meat. It derives from birds brought to the United States from China in the 19th century and is now bred in many parts of the world. For sure, Peking duck is a winning dish. Pancakes, hoisin sauce and spring onions. What's not to like? But the EU Commission claims that Chinese farmers of the fabled fowl benefit from subsidies, soft loans and cheap soybean feed under the country's 5-year plans. Data this week showed that China's exports to the European Union rose to $312 billion in the first 6 months of this year. That means a trade deficit of nearly $177 billion. China is on track to match or beat last year's record trade surplus of $1 trillion. This is the star of the show, the Peking duck. China is exporting so much because it supports economic growth. Exports are absolutely critical to the Chinese economy, but the domestic economy is sluggish and slowing. Let's break this down. China's economic growth slowed sharply between the start of April and end of June as weak domestic demand and the Iran war's impact on oil prices overshadowed the country's strong exports. In fact, China missed its target for 4.5 to 5% GDP growth for the first time since COVID. China's National Bureau of Statistics said the economy grew 4.3% in the quarter ending June 30th, compared to the same period a year ago. It is also still feeling the impact of the real estate market collapse 5 years ago, all of which means China wants to ramp up exports to get the economy cooking. But this is causing havoc for European industries. European farmers say these underpriced imports are eating up their profits. If the Commission investigation proves unfair competition, the EU could impose tariffs on imports of duck meat, whether fresh, frozen or smoked. The EU calls its €1 billion daily trade deficit with China unsustainable. The bloc is working to introduce protective measures against cheap Chinese imports. So far, it has tended to act against industrial products such as chemicals and electric vehicles. For its part, China has repeatedly targeted the EU's agriculture and food sectors with trade defence measures, including anti-subsidy duties on dairy products and anti-dumping duties on pork and brandy.
China's export to the EU keep rising, while our market share in China keeps shrinking. And this trend is not sustainable. The EU remains open for business, but we need to defend our industrial base and keep pushing for level playing field globally so our industries get a fair shot at competing.
China has shown little appetite for limiting exports that have become an increasingly important driver of economic growth. The domestic economy is sluggish and consumer demand refuses to pick up. China's exports to the European Union rose by nearly 19% in June.
China still has a very export-dependent economy. It needs access to the European market. Of course, the US market has closed down to a certain extent to Chinese exports, which have fallen because of Trump's tariffs. So there's a mutual dependence. There is a risk, of course, that if there is no willingness to compromise on the Chinese side, that we do enter a more escalatory dynamic in the trade relationship.
It might sound like a lot of dinner-time drama, but Peking duck is a national treasure in China, so as you imagine, the reaction has been predictably robust. State media has been angered by the Commission's investigation. The Global Times, a news outlet with incredibly close ties to the CCP, said the EU was insecure. It said in an editorial, if the EU remains fixated on protectionism and a beggar-thy-neighbour mindset, the ultimate losers will be European consumers and the future of European industries. It's high time for the EU to set aside its protectionist obsession and return to the path of rationality and cooperation.
在当前形势下，餐饮业已经面临着能源、人工和物流成本大幅飙升的巨大压力。如果在这个时候再增加30%到70%的惩罚性关税，逼得我们不得不再次提高菜品的价格， 这对已经在几年以来应对通货膨胀巨大压力的人们来说，是不可想象，也是难以承受的。
As EU-China trade tensions continue to simmer, it's probably fair to say if it looks like a duck, flies like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it probably is a duck.